Join us as we walk through the thought-provoking insights of Fritz Gilbert's 6 Lessons from 6 Years of Retirement. We explore the key lessons that challenge traditional views on retirement, emphasizing the importance of flexibility, mindset, and the pursuit of fulfillment beyond the financial spectrum. All coming up today on Retire Smarter.
Hey, it's another episode of Retire Smarter. Walter Storholt with you once again here as we're talking with Tyler Emrick, wealth advisor and certified financial planner at True Wealth Design. Based in Northeast Ohio, the team also has offices in Southwest Florida and the greater Pittsburgh area. Tyler's also a chartered financial analyst, and so he's the guy we turn to each and every episode for insights and guidance through the financial and retirement planning landscape. And looking forward to another great episode with you, Tyler. You already teed it up for us, so before we dive into the meat and potatoes of it all, how's life treating you?
Oh, we're hanging in there. No complaints. Although I did come in here this morning all pumped thinking that I got a lot of work done this weekend on my house and cleaning out the garage and all this stuff. And then you kind of one-up me with the, starting of a shed, putting up an entire fence. But hey, other than that, I think I'm doing all right.
I had help, though, with those tasks. And you got to go to the pool. See, I didn't ever make it to the pool. So you really had the solid weekend there, I think.
No, I think maybe up here in Northeast Ohio, we never know what the weather is going to do. So fall is rapidly approaching. So we got to take advantage of
if you get that pool day, you got to take it, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely, because they're going to be gone. Plus, my 2 little ones, it's like their favorite thing to do right now is they're just at that point to where our oldest is 5, and she's learning to pretty much is on her own swimming, and the youngest just turned 3. She's almost there too. So
nice.
They're pretty much over the hump and starting to actually enjoy it a little bit.
Are we starting kindergarten this year, or is that next year?
Next year, yeah.
Next
year for both of them, but they do start. Both of them will be in preschool starting in about a week. So,
nice.
We'll be in the thick of it and on the normal school routine here pretty soon.
Nice, very cool. Well, good luck to the great start of the school year for you guys, the preschool year, and hopefully a few more pool days before all is said and done as well. Let's dive into the topic today. We talked like really specific financial stuff on our last episode about buffered ETFs, and now we kind of flip to the other end of the spectrum here, Tyler, as we talk maybe about, I don't know, the softer side of planning, or more of the kind of, not necessarily the exact numbers and dollars, but a little bit more of just the mentality of retirement and lessons and things like that. And this comes from a blog that kind of jumped out to you recently, and kind of a neat perspective, somebody that's been in retirement for a little bit now and looking back and seeing what lessons they've learned.
It is, yes, absolutely. I mean, I think the blog is pretty well known. It's called the Retirement Manifesto, and it's an individual that's been writing for a number of years now on just retirement and really exploring, just as you had mentioned, the softer side of retirement. And I came across an article that he had wrote here recently called 6 Lessons from 6 Years of Retirement. So it's really just him kind of reflecting back on those first 6 years of retirement and, kind of saying, hey, what lessons can we draw? What can I draw from it? What was I originally thinking heading in? And, how has my mindset changed a bit, over those years? And, from my perspective, I talk to retirees all day, every day. So I absolutely have a passion for it. But, of course, I've got a few years to go before retirement's on the doorstep. So understanding that perspective of someone who's kind of lived it is very, very valuable. So I always try to read articles like this when I come across them. And I thought it was a good time to kind of fit it in. And, really, as we kind of think about the game plan or the roadmap for today, it's just diving into saying, hey, what were these lessons? And, hopefully we'll be able to add a couple good comments and, how it's applicable to some of the families that we've worked with in the past. And, any individual listen that's, heading into retirement and really getting serious about the retirement planning, or if you're just, starting retirement, I think this is going to be a good one to take a look at that softer side, as you had mentioned before.
Sometimes the roadmap to follow is a pretty easy one. And so, today we break down the 6 lessons from this article, and just love getting your perspective on these things, Tyler. So shall we start with the first and dive in?
We should, which is, I think, a pretty easy one. And some might listen and go, well, hey, that makes sense. That's probably what would have been number 1 on my list. But his first lesson is, hey, retirement is complex. And hey, we got a whole podcast on it, Walt. So hopefully we don't run out of topics, and we understand the complexities there for sure. The comment, that he made when he's kind of going back through here, he's like, I've wrote over 400 articles on the topic, over the last almost 10 years. And he's like, that don't tell you the complexity of retirement and some of the decisions that are facing retirees today. He's like, I don't know what will. But when he gets down into this lesson, what I found not necessarily surprising, but very helpful is, he says, while issues of money are top of mind early in retirement or in those early phases of retirement, he emphasizes that the true value comes from figuring out the non-financial issues. And his comment is hey, as he moved through retirement, he realized how truly complex the non-financial issues are, and essentially that understanding and discovering those issues and how they apply and how he can understand them better is where he found true happiness in retirement. So, and I think that rings true to a lot of individuals that I've talked to over the years that are really right on that doorstep of retirement and getting ready to turn the corner into the beginning phases and actually, start to live that retirement life and that they've thought up for themselves. But, there's a lot of complexity there around, well, hey, when do I take Social Security? And what about healthcare? And hey, do I have enough to retire? And all these very, very good questions. What you'll find here as we go down through some of the other lessons is that we don't want to lose sight of and, forget about, the other aspects of what entails retirement. Like, what are you going to be doing? How are you going to spend your time? Where are you driving purpose in retirement? And we'll dive into some of those as we get in, and you'll see how some of his lessons really ring true there. But his first one, pretty easy one here to set us up. Retirement is complex. And I don't think we need to, kind of belabor that point to any of the listeners. It's a multitude of decisions that are going to be in front of you.
Plenty of moving parts to keep track of and try to understand. Lesson number 2 I see here from the article is that retirement changes with time. And I find this interesting because he's only 6 years in, which, isn't that long in the grand scheme of things to be in retirement. So to already have that be one of your lessons is kind of intriguing.
Correct. Yeah. And I love the way that he phrased it. His thoughts on this part of this lesson, I think, evolve around a TED Talk and maybe a book as well, or a blog by Dr. Riley Moynes called The 4 Phases of Retirement and What to Expect When You're Retiring. And it speaks to these, what he calls phases of retirement that, each retiree goes through. And we'll touch on those phases real quick because I think they might be helpful to kind of frame, that retirement journey. And it's going to be different for everyone. Not every person is going to go through every phase of retirement from this individual's, Dr. Riley Moynes' work. And some individuals might go through these phases more quickly than others. But, if you think about how they frame these 4 phases, the first of which is right into retirement, right at the beginning, and they call it the vacation phase, which is just that, right? Hey, it's like a vacation. You're off work and you don't have to go in for 40 or 50 hours a week. So that first phase is that what they call the vacation phase or the honeymoon phase. And then what happens is once you start getting to the end of that vacation phase, what you're going to start asking yourself is, is this all there is to retirement? Right? Is it just, going and traveling or, staying at home, you're reading books and spending time with family or whatever that vacation phase was for you? You start to question in their mind and say, hey, is this all there is to retirement? And they call that second phase lost and loss. And what they're referring to is the fact that you might realize what you have actually lost. You no longer have your job, which you might have been working in for a number of years. You've probably gained quite a bit of sense of purpose. Maybe you have a strong network that you had, at your employment or at the job that you were working. Maybe you had a very important job and you maybe even have lost a little bit of some power, right? For running a division or running a company or whatever the case might be. So this second phase is really exploring that, hey, the vacation phase is over. Now you start to realize like, hey, this is a new chapter in my life. And you start to think through and say, hey, what have I lost? And maybe even feeling a little bit lost, in the thick of it. Now, again, once you kind of go through that second phase in their mind, and you start asking yourself, well, how can I make my life meaningful again? And really start to dive into saying, well, how can I maybe contribute and, have some purpose? They call that, as you're entering what they call the third phase, which they call trial and error. And the concept here is essentially you going through and trying different things to find meaningful life again. The reference that he makes as he's going through this on his TED Talk is he's talking about how he joined his condo association. And he's like, well, that was a mistake because I had people yelling at me about the type of flowers that we decided to plant in the condo community. So, for him,
you're bringing back a lot of memories of me listening to my grandfather's stories of his HOA battles.
Did he do the same? Yeah,
oh,
right.
Yeah. They are all about saving this one tree, and half the people wanted this tree gone because it ruined the view of the harbor, and the other half thought it made the view of the harbor unique, and just all the battles that go on to make it a historic tree, and just years long battles over a tree. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure very valid points probably on both sides, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
But he quickly realized in the story that he tells pretty funny. He's like, hey, this is not how I envision retirement, not what I want to do. So he had to, reevaluate and try something new. But that trial and error phase is really trying to find out and say, well, what is that meaningful purpose in your life, and what are you going to be doing to bring that back into it? I know Kevin's speaks quite a bit on like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and once your basic needs are covered, you start moving up that hierarchy of needs and get into some of these things of, well, what's purpose, and where are you getting that from in retirement? Because so many of us get that through our job and through our network and the things that we're doing throughout our careers. So that third phase, trial and error. And then he said the end goal essentially in their mind is get to phase 4, which they call reinvent and rewire. So we got the vacation phase 1, we got lost and loss, phase 2, and then we got the trial and error phase 3. And this final one again is reinvent and rewire, which, he comments and says not everybody makes it here, but if you do, it's some of the most happy individuals that he's spoken with in retirement. And it's essentially this idea or this concept where you find, well, what is my mission? And he phrased it in one question that I actually found, I thought it was just awesome. So I'm going to just read it here word for word, but it's, how can I squeeze all the juice out of retirement? So how can I squeeze all the juice out of retirement? And that kind of resonated with me, kind of thinking through and saying, well, hey, what are the things that you can do that brings the most impact to your life? And those aren't always going to be financially related, right? But this idea, these phases, and kind of going through them at your own pace, maybe skipping one of them or two of them, but the idea of getting to this place where you can reinvent and rewire and bring happiness to your retirement and be fulfilled is, I think just a wonderful idea. And I don't think enough families kind of think about that side of things, as they're transitioning to retirement. Rightfully so. I mean, there's a lot on their plate. There's a lot of decisions. Hey, do I have enough? Can I do this? Can I actually retire? I think it's there's some credence and some benefit to trying to understand and think through, like, how are you going to approach retirement from a time perspective, and how are you going to spend it? But he summarizes this lesson number 2, this retirement changes with time idea, into a pretty succinct couple sentences here that I'm just going to read them word for word. But he states that the important point is to realize your life doesn't change on the day you retire. Those changes will last for years and will be different than you expect when you first enter retirement. This new reality requires a new approach, and embracing the challenge is part of the fun. So he really just stresses that importance of foster a mindset of curiosity and learn to enjoy the new fluidity of life. So I think it summarizes it pretty well, this idea that, hey, retirement changes with time. I think it's, probably, hey, that makes sense. But when you get down in the nitty gritty of it and explore it a little bit further, I think there's some valuable lessons to learn there.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I'm thinking about kind of watching my own folks go through their first year of retirement. Not quite, I don't think, at the 1 year mark yet, but it's coming up soon for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of interesting because mom's just trying to figure out her place and like what she wants to get into. They've gone through the house renovations. They're kind of at the end of that part of the journey, and now she's like, I think I might want a part-time job because she's doing just kind of free consulting work for friends back at her old job, and they're calling with questions, and whenever they call with problems and questions, she loves that sense of purpose, I think, of being able to walk them through it and still feeling that value. And so I think she wants to scratch that itch with a part-time job, not because she has to, but just because she's like, I think that would be fun. Keep the muscles sharp and give me that purpose.
Sure.
And so she's kind of in that journey right now. Do I do that in a volunteer role? Do I do that for a job? I don't know if she would go down the consulting route, but she's got some options there that she can navigate through. And so it's interesting. She's going through that change already of trying to figure out, what her place in retirement is going to look like.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And I see it all of the time. I mean, I've seen it with my father as well. I mean, he went back to work twice after retiring. Okay. So, I mean, he was a state employee. So one of those was to double dip a little bit and get that pension. But
nice.
But the second one was much more similar to what your mother's going through here. So we see it. We see it all the time.
Well, I think that dovetails nicely probably into this author's third point of you go into retirement and it might not be what you expected it to be.
You got it, right? I mean, he lists off quite a few examples of what he ended up doing that he didn't, wasn't on maybe that initial list of priorities. He talked about how, he has a woodworking shop and a treehouse writing studio. He's talked about his volunteer efforts and charitable work and how they bought a second home after downsizing, which were all things that, weren't on his, I guess, initial retirement list that he thought he'd be doing in retirement, which is perfectly fine. I think we all realize that retirement's going to be a little bit different than you expect. But what I loved here is that he tied it back to what he calls a broader mindset of issues that he wanted to kind of tackle when he went into retirement. So, he listed them out as this concept of 10 commandments of retirement, but essentially these were his guidelines for retirement. And, a couple of them that he listed out was he wanted to give with a generous heart, which dovetailed nicely into it. Wasn't saying, hey, I want to run a charity, right? But this idea of, hey, I want to give with a generous heart kind of in this mindset led me to, being involved more in the charity. He wanted to, one of them was, I want to try new things. Well, hey, that's how the woodworking shop kind of comes to fruition and comes down there. So this idea that the important thing is to get a mindset right and let the journey lead you where it may, I think is the biggest thing that I gained from this lesson number 3, that retirement will be different than you expect. I think it's extremely important to kind of head into retirement with, a certain mindset. And if you have the right one, I think it can really help you kind of go through and at least help you during struggling times in retirement, and just make sure that your course is steady. And if you start to stray off of it, it can certainly bring you back into where you want to be. But, we'll talk more about this idea of the 10 commandments because it does come in a little bit later in one of his lessons. But, retirement will be different than you expect. And then his number 4 lesson mentioned that his priorities actually change throughout retirement. And what he meant by his priorities changed throughout his first 6 years of retirement, as I kind of think about it, is you equate it to your working years, right? I mean, after college, your priority is to find a job. Once you find a job, maybe you want to start a family. If you end up having a family, maybe there's kids that come down the pike, right? Once the kids get out of the house, maybe you start thinking about retirement or paying for college or whatever the case is. But, he mentions that this idea that your priorities continue to change and, are an evolution over time. He thought that pattern would change once he was retired. And hey, I'm retired, but he says that that's just not the case, and it hasn't changed. And he mentioned this concept of, well, when he was first retired, he was very, very focused on, hey, do we have enough to retire? And that really trickled down into his spending patterns and his spending habits and so on and so forth. And then as he started to move through that vacation and honeymoon phase, that phase 1, like we had mentioned a little bit earlier, he actually got to this point to where he's like, man, it's actually hard to spend my money. So him and his wife actually shifted to focus to find ways to force themselves, to spend what they could safely spend. And that this idea of, him finding it hard to spend money, I think to some individuals might be like, what do you mean hard to spend money? But what I see it time and time again with retirees, I mean, a lot of individuals, when they get to retirement, they get there because they had good spending and saving habits, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they live a little bit below
Hard
their
to
means.
unwind those things sometimes.
I feel like it's it's a struggle that many families kind of face, right? I can't tell you how many times I've sat in with families that are 2-3 years into retirement, and we've had a goal of, say, travel or a big trip. And we've pushed it each year, and they just haven't ended up taking it yet. And they thought when they headed into retirement, all this money would be geared towards this particular item. Travel is just an example. I mean, there's a whole host of things that you can think of to spend your money, but it never really comes to fruition. And it takes time and effort to really think through that and get comfortable with this idea of, hey, I'm not working anymore. I got to start potentially living off some of my assets. Is there going to be enough there? And then 2, hey, if I've saved enough for retirement and live this retirement that I want, and some individuals will have a retirement of hopes of spending more in retirement than what they did while they were working because of maybe travel or helping out friends or family or whatever the case is. I think it can be hard to just change those spending patterns that you've had your entire working career. And I think that's where a financial advisor can be really worth their weight in gold, is, kind of getting down in there and making sure that we're revisiting and rehashing those conversations, from a year ago or 2 years ago, of what they wanted and what they were trying to accomplish, and, taking a good hard look and say, well, hey, did those objectives change, and should we be appropriating dollars elsewhere, or is it a fact of, hey, we just need to get more and more comfortable with actually spending, and how do we get there, and really getting families to live their best life in retirement. And I think it can be a struggle for many families, especially individuals early on in retirement.
Well, lots of great lessons already. Hard to believe we're going to squeeze a few more out here, Tyler.
Yeah, 2 more, almost down there. But lesson 5 might be one of my favorite, or probably is my favorite, but it just says mindset matters. And then in parentheses, he's like, a lot. So mindset matters a lot. And I think it's going back to this theme of having a positive mindset, and understand that you are going into a different phase of your life that is going to be different. And a lot of it is going to be on you to fill your time. So you have to be maybe a little bit more deliberate than what you have been in the past for some individuals. He goes back to this idea of the 10 commandments that I briefly mentioned earlier. And he wrote these 10 commandments right as he was heading into retirement. And he viewed them as almost like self-imposed directives, or maybe said another way, they're guidelines that he set for himself as he lives through retirement, that he wants to kind of abide by. And, a couple of those 10 commandments we already mentioned, right? Give with a generous heart, try new things, cherish friends and family, stay flexible to change. These are just, a handful of ones that he had listed on there. And what you'll notice is these are very, very much mindset ideas and concepts, not necessarily things that are very granular, like, hey, I want to buy a new car every 2 years, or, hey, I want to travel to Greece. These directives are much, much more in that, like I mentioned before, the guidelines, I think is a great way to think about it. And on his blog, he's got the 10 commandments on there. You can look them up and see what his are. But the idea that if you have the right mindset, it's going to help you as you move through those phases of retirement that we mentioned earlier. And when you get into that, say, second phase of retirement, where you're, feeling maybe a little bit lost, and, realizing some of the loss that you've experienced not having that work, or maybe some of that purpose, you can kind of really lean on them and rely on them to, kind of move forward and find a place of happiness as you're kind of approaching this, idea of retirement, and finding out, well, hey, what does it look like to you, and what is the meaning going to be?
Yeah, a lot of these things seem like closely related and work with one another, like the changing priorities. No wonder you're going to have your mindset mattering a lot. And so, yeah, neat to see the relationship between these different lessons.
Yeah, absolutely. And then finally, the final lesson that he mentioned on here was just that, hey, retirement can be the best years of your life, but it is up to you. And that's kind of taking that ownership. And I can't stress enough as I kind of think about my role as a financial advisor and, helping families kind of tackle this, big concept of retirement. I take a lot of pride, and hopefully, families I work with, think through and say, hey, it's my job to bring up, some of these things, certainly help out with the financial related decisions, right? And making sure that you're making the best decision for you and your family or whatever that you're trying to accomplish. Certainly, I think that's a big piece. But this softer side of things and understanding, your spending and understanding, where you're using your dollars and making sure that they are being put to their best use case, I think is maybe often looked or missed, not looked, but missed by some advisors, especially some of those advisors that don't take that holistic financial planning approach and taking the time to get to know their families. I think that is just so important. The better that you know the individuals and the clients that you're working with, the better you're going to be able to help see some of these transitions in retirements and be able to speak intelligently and offer advice and certainly just help them get to a point to where they feel more and more comfortable with retirement and where you're at in it.
Great points across the board, Tyler. Some great lessons to take from this article. And can we link to this article in the description of today's show if folks want to go check it out a little bit more?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We covered them all for you, but we'll link to it in the description of today's show if you want to go do a little bit more reading on these great lessons from this Retirement Manifesto blog. In the meantime, Tyler, it seems to me like, there were other lessons in here that he talks about where it's really important to get the right guidance and advice through some of this stuff, not just on the numbers and the dollars, but an advisor or someone in the financial realm that's going to help you through these kinds of things as well. This softer side of planning, kind of emphasizing to make sure that you're working with somebody who takes that to heart and into account.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I mean, you even look back on some of the prior podcasts we've done, right? Where we've had, a multitude of guests on that Kevin's even interviewed, right? Trying to get to this idea of like, what are retirees doing in retirement? How are you spending your time and how can you set yourself up for success and a successful retirement? I think it's just, we do want to make sure it doesn't get lost. The financial aspects are extremely, extremely important, but you work hard your entire life, you save, you do the right things. You want to make sure that you're using your money as a tool to get you to where you want to be. And I think a good financial advisor should help you to get there.
Great points. All right. If you need some guidance and some help, it's really easy to get in touch with the True Wealth Design team. All you have to do is go to truewealthdesign.com, click the Are We Right For You button, and you can schedule a 15-minute introductory call with an experienced advisor on the team to see if you'd be a great fit to work with one another. Again, go to truewealthdesign.com, click Are We Right For You. You can also call, if you prefer, 855-TWD-PLAN, 855-893-7526. We'll put that contact information in the description of today's show so you can find it easily. Tyler, thank you for all the great assistance and help today. Really appreciate it. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and good luck getting the girls into preschool and ready for that school year to begin, and we'll be catching up again in a few weeks.
Oh, absolutely. It was fun.
Hey, it'll basically be fall next time we chat. Probably. We'll probably turn that page, I think. It's good stuff. All right, man. Take care, and thank you for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time. We're right back here on Retire Smarter.
Information provided is for informational purposes only and does not constitute investment, tax, or legal advice. Information is obtained from sources that are deemed to be reliable, but their accurateness and completeness cannot be guaranteed. All performance reference is historical and not an indication of future results. Benchmark indices are hypothetical and do not include any investment fees.